Everybody. Today, my team is happy to recognize several hunter education instructors who have done some great things over the past year. Wendy Coons, our new Hunter Trapper Education Program Administrator, will be working with James, our Hunter Trapper Education Management Technician, to hand out some awards to our instructors today. Wendy started with us just 2 weeks ago, and we're very excited to have her with us. Wendy has over 20 years experience working in conservation education and has worked in hunter education in several other states. So at this time, I would like to welcome Wendy up to the podium.
Good afternoon. As Courtney said, I'm Wendy Coons. I'm your new Hunter Trapper Education Program Administrator, and after 20 plus years of being out west, I'm very happy and very excited to be back in my home state of PA. And this is day 10, so I'm very excited also that one of my first official duties is to present the outstanding awards to our instructors for the year. But before doing so, I want to thank all of our Hunter Trapper Education instructors in the state. They collectively donated over 17,000 hours of their time the last fiscal year and certified over 15,000 new hunters and trappers in the state. So their time and their dedication for teaching safe, responsible, and ethical hunting and trapping to our residents is sincerely appreciated. So to recognize our instructors who will be receiving our Regional Outstanding Instructor of the Year awards. Each instructor who is presented an award today was nominated by a state game warden for going above and beyond the duties of a regular hunter and trapper education instructor. The introductions I will read are just paraphrased from the nomination letters. We would like to ask all the recipients to move out into the lobby for pictures after they receive their award. Our first recipient receiving the Outstanding Instructor of the Year award for the North Central Region, nominated by State Game Warden Remen Snyder, is Mike Griffin. Mike began teaching hunter trapper education with the Buffalo Valley Sportsmen's Association in 2014. Since becoming an instructor, Mike has utilized and shown his knowledge and teaching skills by instructing the archery and tree stand safety portion of the course. He's adamant about tree stand safety, going so far as to bring his personal equipment to class, to provide students with an up-close look at how the components operate, and provide maximum safety instruction. Whether it be adults taking bow hunter education or youth taking the basic hunter trapper education course, Mike is able to speak to students in a way that's understandable and informative. Along with this, Mike is extremely thorough in all facets of the basic hunter trapper education course, providing students with the tools necessary to become safe and successful hunters. Congratulations, Mike, on receiving the North Central Region Outstanding Instructor of the Year award.
We're going to take it out.
Okay. Very good.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you for coming to work with us.
You're very welcome. Next, nominated by State Game Warden Alex DeSico, our Outstanding Instructor of the Year for the Northwest Region is James B. Kirkpatrick. This fall, Jim will be celebrating his 50th year as a hunter education instructor, and that alone deserves recognition. Each year, Jim coordinates with all the instructors and facilities in Clarion County to set the hunter trapper education schedule, as well as maintain materials and equipment for the year. Through Jim's efforts and coordination with other instructors, Clarion County maintains a schedule of 8 classes annually, including a technology-free Amish community class. These classes boast fantastic participation with near 100% success. As an avid hunter and trapper, Jim has a passion for showing our future hunters the lawful way to pursue wildlife in the Commonwealth. Congratulations, Jim, for earning the Northwest Region Outstanding Instructor of the Year Award. Thanks, Jim. Good to meet you. Our Southeast Region Outstanding Instructor of the Year, Thomas Marquardt, was nominated by State Game Warden Pete Sussenbach. Tom has been a tremendous asset to those looking to begin their hunting experiences. He's been an instructor for over 35 years, serving most of those years as a lead instructor for classes. He has consistently led his team in hosting 3 to 4 classes a year. He prepares each class with dedicated care and attention to detail, making sure all students have an opportunity to learn. Tom has also served as the district's hunter education coordinator, working to support a large group of instructors, making sure they have what they need to provide quality training to students. This recognition is reserved for a limited number of instructors that go above and beyond and are truly worth the designation of outstanding. Through his years of dedication, effort, and sacrifice, Thomas Marquardt is truly worthy of being recognized as the Southeast Region's Outstanding Instructor of the Year. Congratulations, Tom. Nominated by State Game Warden Justin Ritter, the Outstanding Instructor of the Year for the South Central Region is Benjamin Halstead Sr. Ben Halstead has distinguished himself not only as a hunter-trapper education instructor, but as a mentor to new hunters in York County. He's been essential in the success of the hunter-trapper education program in his district. He's known for lending his knowledge and skills to conservation clubs that are new to holding hunter-trapper education classes. Thanks to Ben's teaching style, knowledge, preparedness, and devotion to helping students, the success rate of his classes has been 100% this past year. Ben is also an instructor for successful fur taking, having instructed at least 30 of these courses since 2003. He's always the last one to leave a course, making sure that equipment is stored, floors are swept, and even staying 2 hours after class to make sure several students had found rides home. His actions truly show his dedication to helping others. Congratulations, Ben, for receiving the South Central Region's Outstanding Instructor of the Year Award.
Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to ask State Game Warden Ned Kimmel to present the Southwest Region Award.
Thank you, Wendy. I'd like to recognize Aaron Cunningham as the Southwest Region's Outstanding Instructor of the Year. Throughout the past few years, Aaron has progressively become an integral part of our hunter-trapper education district crew here in Indiana County. Without instructors like Aaron, our hunter-trapper education program, simply put, would not be feasible. Aaron builds rapport with all students and parents, and her interactive teaching skills help students pay attention and stay on task throughout the course. She's very knowledgeable of all types of technology used in our courses and is often the go-to instructor to get equipment up and running. Over the years, Aaron has gone above and beyond, teaching in multiple districts and teaching multiple classes to ensure that classes are being held where the needs exist. She's now taken on the role of lead instructor in multiple classes throughout the coming year. For receiving the Outstanding Instructor of the Year for the Southwest Region, I'd like to say congratulations, Aaron. Thank you.
And lastly, State Game Warden Benjamin Rebuck will present the award for the Northeast Region Instructor of the Year and our statewide Outstanding Instructor of the Year.
Good afternoon. My name is Ben Rebuck. I'm a warden in Susquehanna County, way up in the Northeast. So today I have the distinct honor of recognizing Leonard Scott Dibble as both the Northeast and state recipient of Instructor of the Year. I've had the privilege to work with 3 generations of Dibbles. Scott's father taught hunter education for 35 years. Of the last 17 years of that, Scott taught alongside of him. Earlier this year, we put on Scott's nephew as a hunter education instructor, and I have no doubt that he will do great things like the Dibbles before him. Scott's ambition and creativity in generating attention to upcoming classes has allowed his class participation to be noticeably higher than other local classes. He uses his own time and his resources to create social media posts and flyers to raise awareness of class opportunities. He's even gone so far as to attempt to develop a QR code for flyers that would allow individuals to scan the QR code and be taken directly to that specific class registration. Scott has a strong sense of autonomy and moving through the class planning process. I've rarely found a need to oversee his work, as it's always thorough and complete. However, Scott maintains a great team spirit and really synchronizes well with all other aspects, with all other instructors. Scott serves as a role model for students and fellow instructors to emulate. The work ethic and positive attitude that he brings to each class is contagious to everyone. Scott humbly inspires those around him. There's no need for a caveat. Scott's accomplishments alone are more than deserving of this award. But the fact that so many people have reached out to me because they're empowered by what Scott is accomplishing while being bound to a wheelchair is something that I can't go without recognizing. Simply put, Scott is a great instructor, but more importantly, he's a great person. So thank you, Scott. Thank you for everything you do for the hunting community. You well deserve this award. Lots of hard work. Yeah. So, what can I present?
Yeah, go for it.
I'll give you the big one first. Instructor of the Year Award. Congratulations, Scott. So, I'll carry these out. We've got lots of stuff. So, thank you. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. It's my distinct pleasure, along with President of the Board of Commissioners, Kristen Schnepp-Geiger, to present the 25-year awards to some very special employees. You know, when you close your eyes and you think, and I say the words Pennsylvania Game Commission, probably maybe something that goes through your mind is our logo, or maybe a vision of a wildlife officer out there checking hunters, or maybe a white-tailed deer running through the field on opening day of rifle season. But behind all of that, and the things that makes the Pennsylvania Game Commission who we are, is our employees. And today I would like to recognize 4 employees who have been with us for 25 years. There's many places our employees could go work. These are skilled, talented people with great, amazing talents, but they chose to stay and help us make the Pennsylvania Game Commission who it is today. First, I'd like to recognize Jerry Check. Daniel Sittler. Stephen Leindecker. And no, April Holzer. All right, that concludes our 25-year employees. Congratulations to them, and congratulations to the Pennsylvania Game Commission for having them this long, and we look for many years ahead.
Good afternoon, commissioners, executive staff, members of the public. So, kind of like Brian said, there's a lot of employees behind the logo, and there's over 700 of us that work every day, and most of us don't stand behind this podium. Most of us won't have the opportunity to be in the news, whether that's an interview or something like that. So most of us come to work every day and get up and they work hard for wildlife and the wildlife resource. And I want to introduce you to one of those people that you probably haven't heard of, that hasn't been at the podium, that hasn't provided testimony or hasn't been in a report. So Emily Cleese, I'm going to embarrass the devil out of you. If you come up here while I read this, come on up. Yeah. And so I want to read the nomination that we have provided for Emily. So this was a nomination that for a merit award that we put together. This was from Scott Bear, Tim Haight, Emily Boyd, Emily Carollo, and myself. And I think it's important to understand that that's multiple bureaus that Emily doesn't belong in that have nominated her for awards. So I think that speaks to the value of this employee. So Emily Cleese joined the Bureau of Automated Technology GIS Services Division in September of 2020 and serves as a Geospatial Specialist 2. A native of Bellefonte, PA, Emily is stationed out of the North Central Region office and reports to James Whitaker, the GIS Services Division Chief, who will be presenting the award. Since joining the agency, Emily has proven herself as a most valuable employee through an innovative spirit, a relentless can-do attitude, and a pursuit of excellence in all matter of work and professionalism. Prior to joining the agency, Emily developed a strong natural resources foundation, holding a bachelor's degree in environmental resources management and a master's in forest resources management, both through Penn State. With previous experience through federal agencies and private industry, she brings that knowledge and understanding to her current position and the many projects that the agency is involved with. Although a specialist with the GIS technology, she has the difficult task of becoming a specialist in many of the other aspects of our agency. She's had to learn to become an expert on wetlands and water control structures, on snowshoe hare and hare habitat manipulation, black bear population analysis, on aquatic organism passage, American marten ecology and habitat requirements, and a diversity of other projects and programs throughout the Pennsylvania Game Commission. Her keen intelligence and passion for the natural world is evident in how she approaches each project with a willingness to learn through careful research and taking that knowledge in order to overcome hurdles and see it through to its completion. A perfect example of this was her work with the aquatic organism passage. Before her engagement, the agency was making no meaningful progress within this arena. Emily led the way by becoming an NAACC certified survey coordinator and training staff throughout the regions to survey all and developing a GIS web tool to pull and analyze survey data. Because of this, the PA Game Commission is now the nationwide leader in both surveying these passages, but also in the development of an AOP project restoration and connectivity. Her work directly led to the awarding of a $500,000 NIFWIF grant to further this important work. And as the agency explores the potential for reintroduction of the American marten, Emily played a critical role in determining one of the most important considerations: does Pennsylvania have suitable habitat for the marten? She met with experts from around the country to understand marten habitat requirements and techniques used to model habitat suitability, and developed a state-of-the-art model for both Pennsylvania and the Northeast. This model was a significant portion of the feasibility assessment completed for this project. Her work was then presented at several professional national conferences and even used as an example within a national workshop for GIS training. Along with Martin, Emily is focused on snow cover for the snowshoe hare, trying novel new approaches, and enabling the Game Commission to be the first organization to track trends geospatially of the annual duration of snow cover statewide in Pennsylvania. The agency has recently begun a monumental statewide effort to restore its wetlands by replacing many of the outdated and failing water control structures. This $6 million effort hung on identifying all of the structures within our purview and collecting a comprehensive spatial data set that could be utilized to prioritize and plan with. Emily spearheaded this effort by developing an easy data collection form on iPads and then literally putting on her muck boots and going out with regions to train staff on surveying and data collection. With time running out, she spent days afield collecting data herself and then worked with a team to develop a prioritization tool in order to catapult this project forward. This agency is filled with hardworking women and men that go above and beyond every day. Emily has shown her immense value in the projects that directly accomplish the mission of the agency here in Pennsylvania, at the same time making Pennsylvania a national leader in many of these aspects. While her contributions are significant, her positive attitude, shining personality, and work ethic are equally, if not more important. She is confident in her ability while always eager to learn, and humble, quick to redirect credit to someone else. She is a patient teacher and never too busy to lend a hand to her colleagues. Emily Cleese embodies the spirit of the ideal Pennsylvania Game Commission employee, and for this reason, in tandem with her substantial contributions, she is receiving this Meritorious Award. So congratulations, Emily.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm really honored to be here today. I've got a great team here between Kevin and Dean. Dean has been an incredible maintenance repairman. If you really look at the position, that is really not the description of what he does every day. I've been fortunate enough in the last 2 years to have worked side by side with both of these individuals, and most importantly, Dean. Dean has been an incredible resource. He goes far above and beyond every day. When I look at some of the accomplishments over the last several years, it is really astonishing. We've done a complete revamp of the front entrance to the region office. It looks spectacular. I would encourage anybody to come in there at some point in time, join us for any meetings. In the old days, you'd walk in the front lobby and it would just be like a regular old lobby entrance. We've been very fortunate. We blew out some walls. We put up a really nice display. It's got native Pennsylvania wildlife. It's really a place to be proud of. We've had, over the last several weeks, with the amount of traffic we've had, we had a tremendous amount of positive reviews on what was done there. And it wasn't as simple as it sounds. This is like months in the making, and it was really the culmination of a bunch of great ideas that came out, mostly from Dean, and how to kind of circumnavigate getting the process done. It doesn't stop there, though. Every day seems like another adventure in a region office. There's something that happens with resources, with some of the equipment that we've got, and Dean is really that go-to person. He's not the jack of all trades, as we've all heard, and master of none. He's the jack of all trades and the master of most. And those few that he doesn't know how to accomplish, he generally finds a way to get them done with outside resources. So we've nominated Dean for a Distinguished Service Award. Excuse me. And we're really proud of everything you do for us every day. Thank you.
We're going to take a 10-minute break, reconvene, and get into staff presentations this afternoon. Per Brian's gentle reminder, we are now starting into staff presentations.
Good afternoon, Commissioners and executive staff. I have the unique privilege to get to share with you today the American Marten Reintroduction and Management Plan for Pennsylvania. Now, this plan has been a part of a long-term evaluation process that we've been working through together, and really originated as early as 2019 when we started to work on our strategic plan for 2020 to 2023. In that plan, we had a goal, and as part of that goal, we wanted to develop a feasibility assessment for reintroduction. That was presented at last year's July meeting, and we were directed to move forward to the second part of that goal, which was to develop a reintroduction and management plan. And of course, that's why we're here today, to share that with you. Primary goals of this plan begin with cooperative partnerships, as do most of our projects. We work into translocation, research and monitoring, information and education, and then of course population management into the long run. Again, we stated how important partners are, and with this plan that is no different. We've categorized our partners into three separate categories, the first being release partners. And we think about release partners, this is areas within the state where we'd be able to release marten, and we're thinking primarily of public land areas. Our largest public landholders in Pennsylvania are DCNR, the U.S. Forest Service, and of course the Pennsylvania Game Commission. We've been working very closely internally to build partnerships as well as externally, and have received letters of support from DCNR and the U.S. Forest Service for this project. Our second group is our source partners, and our source partners are of course where we would get marten from and move them into Pennsylvania. We've been working with many states and provinces, and there's still a lot of work to do, but so far we've received letters of support from Maine, Michigan, and New York, and we're expecting one shortly from New Brunswick. And finally, translocation partners. And this is a large variety of different partners that can fill roles such as wildlife health, wildlife holding, providing staff, and a variety of other things. These partners are extremely important when we start to think about selecting release locations, but also as habitat availability. And when we look at this map, which is from our feasibility assessment, and our habitat suitability in Pennsylvania, we see again that most of our habitat is in that north central, northwest, and then up into the northeast. The most important thing to look at when we look at specific sites is this dark green area, which is our large contiguous areas, particularly over 125 square kilometers. And when we zoom in on that, you can start to see where some of those large chunks exist that are going to be important for a project like this. Now, the first and foremost is this area in Hammersley Wild Area. This is a 30,000 acre area managed by the DCNR. This is right in the core of that habitat. The second is this game lands complex. And this complex creates basically a bridge over to the ANF to where we can expect marten to cross back and forth with populations. To the east, we have our Wolf Run Wild Area Complex, which also has two additional wild areas and natural areas, all managed by DCNR, as well as a game lands that's adjacent to two of these wild areas. And then we have our North Allegheny National Forest parcel. This one's important because habitat continues across our border up into New York. And we've worked with our partners in New York, the Allegheny State Park, as well as the Seneca Nation, and we've received letters of support from both of these partners who would be excited to partner with us on this project. We also considered another portion of Allegheny National Forest, which is in the southwest, has a large area of optimal habitat with a wild area and is adjacent to state game lands as well. We would only select one of these, and it would likely be the one to the north. And finally, the Loyalsock Complex. This is the Loyalsock State Forest. It also has two game lands associated with it and a natural and wild area. So these are the release locations we would be most interested in, and we've worked very closely with our partners with Forest Service and DCNR to help select these. Now, translocation is a very multifaceted process, and what that means is that there's very many layers to it and many steps. And as we work through these steps, the first of these is coordination and planning. And this is so important to set up project coordinators here in Pennsylvania, as well as in our source locations. These coordinators would work with trappers and source holding staff, transport staff, and health staff. Here in Pennsylvania, we would have release partners that would be willing to help us with this project as well. Following that coordination and planning, we would go into trapping, actually working with trappers during the trapping season who have a good record of catching marten, providing them with live traps, providing them with holding boxes, and then once the animal's captured, working with them to get it to a source holding facility. We would have a coordinator at that area to get those and then ship those out, whether that be through air or through ground, to get them down to Pennsylvania. Once they're received by Pennsylvania partners, and we have several partners already willing to help us with this, they would receive health evaluations. They'd also receive any vaccinations necessary and testing, and then they would be fitted with collars, pit tags, and anything else that they would need pre-release. During release, we'd be working with release partners throughout the state within these release areas, and really at the end of the day, we're looking to release healthy marten in an optimal habitat. Now, research and monitoring would be following this and is extremely important, and it's really important for measuring our success and directing our future management of this species. When we think about research and monitoring, we're thinking about things like survival and mortality. We know this is a small 2-pound animal that has other predators like the coyote and the fisher, like the owl. And so we need to understand, what does survival look like for adults and look like for juveniles, and what would be causing mortality. We would also look at movement. What does dispersal look like once they are released? And then, of course, what does dispersal look like for juveniles across the landscape? And then looking at habitat selection within their home ranges and comparing that to the habitat suitability model that we've developed. Reproduction is very important to understand, do we have a self-sustaining population? And then, of course, looking at diet. And that's been a major part of our feasibility assessment. And so looking at the 13 different diet studies that we've evaluated from across the range, does the diet match up here in Pennsylvania? Finally, looking at species of concern. And this could be SGCNs, this could be T&E species, or just species that constituents have primary concerns over. And this is looking at both pre- and post-release of marten. Now, information and education have begun. We're on day one. We started this at the beginning, and we're going to continue this throughout the life of this project because of how important it is. And the first thing that we needed to do was figure out who was our target audience. In Pennsylvania, our state constitution tells us that wildlife belongs to all Pennsylvanians. And that's really who our target audience is for this project. We're partnering with many different partners, both internally. Our regions have played a major role in helping get this out, as well as the Bureau of Marketing and Strategic Communications, Bureau of Information and Education. But we've also partnered with over 38 different organizations outside of our agency to help get this information out as well. And an important part of that is message development. And message development looks at frequently asked questions, looks at concerns that come into the board and come into staff. And we also can start to talk to other stakeholder groups and find out what are their primary concerns and questions, and develop focus groups, which is what we see here, a focus group designed specifically for turkey hunters in Pennsylvania to better develop our message for that group. And then, of course, resources. In January, I gave an update and provided a toolbox, which included our story map, included our video, our brochure, and since then we've developed quite the load of different resources that we've been able to utilize throughout this project, and we're going to continue to do that if the plan would be released to the public. The strategies that we've developed and pushed out, the first of those is a statewide campaign. We've put together 73 different in-person events throughout the state of Pennsylvania, and a lot of those were formal presentations with questions and answers afterwards. But we've also done a lot of open houses in each of our regions to make it a more informal process and allow people to come in and talk to staff. With that, we've estimated we've talked to well over 5,000 people in person, and that's been extremely important for many folks. But we've talked to tens of thousands of people and reached tens of thousands of people through the audio, digital, and print space. And that has come through with things like our Facebook Live event with our Bureau of Marketing and Strategic Communications. We worked with INE to develop webinars. We've done a lot of different working with reporters from around the state, doing interviews, writing articles, and getting this information out in as many different forms as we can. And we've tried some really novel approaches as well. If you haven't taken the time, please stop in the lobby and check out some of the art from our middle and high schoolers from across the state that we did an art contest for, and we were able to tie that in with our plan. We've also attended many different events where we could set up a booth and talk to individuals as they move through the event. And I always like to point out, down in Lancaster, there was a school that, for their middle school and high school, they actually did a live debate on this topic, and they had me down and another warden, and it was just a really neat way for those kids to understand how this process works. Now, this plan presents a reasonable budget and an achievable timeline, and we can see both here. This starts in 2024 and it ends in 2033, and you can see that first year is really what we talked about, the importance of that coordination and preparation. And so it's starting to hire folks in the source locations, the coordinators, getting trappers lined up, getting supplies built and sent up. The second year, we would start translocation efforts, and we would start those for one release site per year for 5 years. We know we need at least 60 individual martens for one release site, so we would work across several different source locations to get those animals and get them down to Pennsylvania. Following that, we would have a period of monitoring and research to see out the end of this plan, and that's very important to understand whether we're having success or not. You can see the budget is just over $2 million, and we break that out on an annual scale. We're looking at about $203,000 per year. Now, this is often skipped over, but plan management is an important aspect of a successful follow-through for any plan. And that really means that it's an adaptive plan. And part of this plan is to bring on basically a reintroduction team made up of stakeholders and internal staff to help guide this plan throughout the process. The second part of that is make sure it's a long-term plan. We know biologically marten can take some time to establish and grow their populations. And then looking at harvest into the future. And harvest is critical for all of our fur bearer species because that's really how we make a lot of our decisions, by working with trappers, looking at harvest, collecting data. That's really important. And then conflict. We don't anticipate conflict, but it's important that we address it within the overall plan. As far as the development of this plan, we formed a steering committee, and we invited many different NGOs and stakeholders from around the state to be a part of that. We also had many internal upper management staff as a part of that as well to help guide us through this process. During the review period, we sent this draft out to over 65 different individuals that are represented by these organizations on the screen. As far as what our next steps are, it's really to follow a proven path within a diligent evaluation process. And what that looks like is starting with the strategic plan, moving to a feasibility assessment, which was completed, moving to the reintroduction and management plan draft, which we're rolling out today. And then at this point, we're asking the board to release this draft to the public for review for a 60-day review period. And that follows with all of our other management plans and what we've done in the past. Should that be rolled out for the public, we would then take those comments after 60 days, address those within the plan, we would summarize those as well, and then we would bring this back to the board with a final plan asking for board acceptance as early as January of 2024. If the board would choose to accept the plan, we would move forward with reintroduction. If the board would choose not to, that's where this project would end. So at this time, I'm happy to answer any questions, comments, or concerns that the board might have.
I have a clarification question.
Sure.
So, can you please restate how many would be released if we go through the public comment and this moves forward, how many would be released at each site? Did you say 60?
Yeah, 60 individuals at each site is what we need for a minimum population to sustain itself into the future.
And you're saying 5 sites? Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
So just for clarification amongst everyone in this room, the next steps in this process is to take your plan and submit it for public consideration, public comment.
That's correct, President. Yes, it would be to move it out for public comment period of 60 days.
Thank you.
And it would be this plan that you're going to put out there for everyone to read? Okay.
That's correct, yes.
We might want to add an executive summary.
Oh, there's one in there, but they must not have printed it for you.
Any other questions from the board? Thank you, Tom.
Found it? Okay, thanks.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Lisa Williams, the Chief of the Wildlife Recovery Division. And in the Wildlife Recovery Division, we work very hard on targeted and active recovery before we lose a species from the Commonwealth. The goal is to prevent species loss for us. So we're taking typically the most imperiled, the most at-risk species and triaging our way through those to figure out which ones do we need to prioritize and what actions do we need to prioritize to prevent their loss. But in this era of multiple large-scale threats hitting many species at once, our job is becoming more difficult. We are fighting battles on more fronts, and we're having an ever-increasing list of species that are moving into that highly vulnerable category. It can be downright depressing sometimes. But to help us succeed in that our mandate of preventing species loss, we have 2 dedicated recovery biologists in our division that you'll hear from today. I'm just here to introduce them. Thank you. The recovery biologists are tasked with really 4 primary roles. First is to fill information gaps so that we can really understand what's driving species decline. What are pushing these species toward the brink? Secondly, their job is to develop highly focused recovery plans and recovery actions so that we're really honing in instead of sort of whacking out brush fires, the sky is falling, we're developing very targeted implementation plans to recover these species. Thirdly, and perhaps the most important part of their job is to serve as a liaison and teammate with our regions on matters affecting species recovery programs. And within that role, they're sharing their knowledge of species management needs, but they're also learning from the regions about what's been tried on game lands. What have different regions tried? What's worked? What hasn't worked? And they're conveying that success that's found in this region to other regions. So sharing that information across the state so that we can quickly ramp up successful programs. And then finally, working together to test and pilot new approaches. So we've charged them with, thinking outside the box. Don't just rely on the literature and what you learned coming up through the ranks as a biologist, but really focus, take what you know about the drivers of decline, the species biology, what is our potential on game lands, and think outside the box don't be afraid to create and test new management approaches. Because for most of these species, we don't have time to do it slowly. And we need to quickly find success, find what we can ramp up for the species' benefit. And then to complete that learning loop, that adaptive management loop, they're also tasked with organizing and assisting in the follow-up monitoring. So after we implement a recovery action, checking to see if the species is actually benefiting in the way that we would hope, to see if we're getting the bang for the buck that we want out of these recovery implementations. So that's a tall order for any one biologist, and it requires really a special mix of scientific integrity, real-world experience, and people skills for the collaborations that are required to recover a species. Unfortunately, we secured 2 great biologists about 6 months ago, and you're going to meet them today. I just want to introduce them quickly to you. Kate Otterbein is our mammal recovery biologist. She has extensive experience in relocating and translocating imperiled species, as well as working with species facing disease threats, which is an ever-growing issue for many of our vulnerable wildlife. And Kate will be presenting an update on new efforts in our ongoing emergency response to the bat decline. Again, trying new things. What can we learn from new effort? Stefan Karkov is our avian recovery biologist. He has nearly a decade of experience working directly with land managers and landowners to put high-quality habitat on the ground to support declining species. And Stefan will be talking with you about a new recovery focus we're having with grassland birds, where the Game Commission is really poised to make unique contributions to recovering that whole suite of grassland birds. I'll just wrap up. I mean, most of you know the Game Commission has a reputation among eastern states for being the agency that does stuff. You know, we are definitely doers among our compatriots. We take on tough issues, we roll up our sleeves, we're not afraid to try new approaches. We envision these new methods, sometimes very novel, out-of-the-box methods. We implement them, we monitor the outcomes, and we build on successes rapidly to expand the conservation benefit. We really are the doers. Because of this, we often find ourselves, I find us, a leader among agencies in this realm of wildlife recovery. I complain oftentimes that wildlife recovery programs are often too content to count noses, and just monitor species as they're winking out. We're different. You know, we really do get dirty, try things, and have come up with some really amazing successes just in the past few years that we can now ramp up and that other states are paying attention to. So I'm proud to introduce Kate and Stefan to you today. They're going to share in some of these recent successes, and they're also going to talk about next steps in the Game Commission's mission to lead the way recovering those highest risk birds and mammals. Kate?
This is already at the perfect height. Thanks, Melanie. All right. Well, hello, everybody. As Lisa mentioned, my name is Kate Otterbein, and I'm the new mammal recovery biologist in the protected mammal section of the Wildlife Recovery Division in the Bureau of Wildlife Management. And the protected mammal section has oversight of about 34 of Pennsylvania's 63 mammal species. And we work to establish monitoring programs for these species, to investigate threats and knowledge gaps, and to develop and implement management actions with the ultimate goal being species recovery. We can't do this alone. As Lisa also mentioned, this really requires building relationships with regional staff and development of these recovery, or the regional recovery teams to work together to prioritize species management. We primarily focus our most intensive recovery efforts on those species that are state or federally listed and those species that we have the greatest chance of losing within the state. So today I'm going to focus primarily on some bat research that's been going on in the past year. So just as a little bit of background here, white nose syndrome is an entirely catastrophic disease amongst hibernating bats. It first started killing bats in Pennsylvania around 2009, and within 3 to 4 years, it had killed about 99% of our hibernating bats in the state. You can see on the chart up here in 2008, we counted about 100,000 hibernating bats in Pennsylvania, and these were just the sites where we are routinely monitoring over the winter. This does not encompass all of the thousands of sites that bats do hibernate within the state. By 2012, we saw only a few thousand bats left hibernating in the state, just an entirely catastrophic disease again. But it's also important to mention here that though this is representative of what was happening in Pennsylvania, this was also happening outside of Pennsylvania. These are range-wide impacts that are happening to these species and really just decimating populations. Now, some good news. There are still survivors of all of these species. All 6 of our hibernating bat species in Pennsylvania are still here in Pennsylvania, although their numbers are greatly reduced. All of these species are now species of greatest conservation need, or SGCN, in the state of Pennsylvania. 4 of them, the furthest on the left there, are state endangered species, and 1 is a state threatened species. Additionally, as of earlier this year, we officially have 2 federally endangered bat species in the state. We have 1 that's currently proposed for uplisting to federally endangered status, and we have a 4th that's currently under review for federal listing. So that one is not yet listed as either threatened or endangered, but is under review for that, which status is most appropriate. So because of this, considerable effort continues to go into finding, protecting, and recovering these species. Now today we're going to focus on the work of the protected mammals section over the past year that specifically targeted the little brown bat. This is a species that's currently under review for federal listing, and also, it's important to note that 15 years ago, before white nose syndrome, this was the most abundant bat species in the state of Pennsylvania and in the eastern United States. Since white nose syndrome hit, we've seen a 99% mortality rate in this species, which is what has brought it to this current status of being under review. So, because the species is under review for federal listing, it's incredibly important for us to provide the best information that we can, the best population estimates that we can to the Fish and Wildlife Service so that they can take into account the Pennsylvania population status during the review process. And more than that, because this species is found outside of Pennsylvania, it's important that all other states contribute in a similar manner as well. Okay, so as part of this monitoring for this population status, we have been doing our regular hibernation counts in caves where the bats are overwintering, and also counts at maternity sites, maternity colonies. And these are places where the females come together in the spring and summer to all give birth and raise their pups together. Before white nose syndrome, we knew of hundreds of little brown bat maternity colonies across the state. And since white nose syndrome hit, we know of 22 of them. So these sites are really important because it's where females are giving birth and it's where pups are being raised and hopefully surviving to come back and contribute to this population. And so this is an important process and an important site for our recovery efforts. Specifically, we need to know if we are aware of all of the major maternity sites in the state. And also, we need to know what are the breeding populations at these maternity sites, and we need to be able to report that information back to Fish and Wildlife Service, especially now during this time of review for the species. Oops. Hang on, wrong button. So if we know where all of the major maternity sites are for the species within the state, then we can start to protect those sites. Any new additional sites that we might be able to add, we can offer additional protection to help those young pups grow and survive and contribute to these populations throughout the state. But again, it takes teams of PGC personnel to work together in species recovery. These are huge tasks, and the bat recovery is really a prime example of this. So first of all, we talk about protecting winter colonies, winter hibernation sites, and that requires involvement of land managers and of habitat crews with welding skills and disease technicians to monitor these sites and bureau biologists to guide this work. And that's all fine and dandy until the bats leave their winter caves, and then it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. So we suddenly need a whole new team of people that have a different set of skills. So we have bureau biologists that can organize tracking efforts, and region disease technicians, again, that can follow those tagged bats to find where they're going within the search area. So working with these teams in 2023, we've placed new emphasis on locating those important maternity colonies with those young pups. And to do this, we trapped female little brown bats that were coming out of their winter caves, and we placed radio transmitters on them and then tracked them back to their maternity colonies. We also caught them in nets during the spring and summer and placed transmitters on them and tracked them back to their maternity colonies as well. Because little brown bats are gregarious and form these maternity colonies with many individuals at one site, we can often find many bats by tracking just one. So we are currently the only state that is taking this particular approach with little brown bats, but we're hoping that if we can show some success here, it will encourage other states to do the same, to improve population estimates that they also might be able to contribute to the Fish and Wildlife Service during this review process of the species. So this spring, we trapped at 2 caves where we knew from winter surveys that little brown bats were hibernating. And we put transmitters on 33 female little brown bats as they exited those caves. We then followed them, and they led us to 17 new maternity colonies. And even more important than that, within those 17 new maternity colonies, there were over 1,000 other little brown bats. And these are, again, reproductive females that are contributing to the population. We also netted 1 female little brown bat during the spring and placed a transmitter on her. She led us to her maternity colony, where we found an additional 200 female little brown bats. So using this new technique with 3 individual recovery efforts, we tagged 34 total females, and they led us to over 1,200 new little brown bat females, which I know 1,200 bats, that's not exciting to everybody, I get it, but that does represent about a 25% increase in the known population of reproducing female little brown bats. And that's really, really huge, especially for a species who has suffered 99% mortality in recent years. So moving forward, this new population estimate will better inform that federal listing decision, since the species is currently under review for listing. And this information coming out of Pennsylvania could honestly be the difference between the species being listed as federally endangered or federally threatened, and that's really huge. At the state level, this unexpectedly huge outcome with this technique means that we will continue this effort at other hibernation sites where we find little brown bats. The maternity colonies that we just found will continue to be monitored to document any recovery. And we will also work with landowners to protect these colonies and provide bat boxes as needed, because we know that that can really support colonies that are in peril. You can see in the photo on the right, that's a bat box that is just absolutely crammed full of reproductive little brown bats. Lots and lots of females in there. So we know that these small actions, if done appropriately, can make huge conservation impacts. So ultimately, for this species that is undergoing such an extreme decline in population, every site that we find them at, every bat really, really counts. And in this particular instance, we just found 1,200 new to us little brown bats in the state, which is an amazing recovery result for this first year pilot effort for this new technique. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
What kind of additional protections do you put in place when you find those maternity colonies? Is it like predator protections, or what do you do for those?
I don't think that we've really done much in the way of predator protections. A lot of it has to do with monitoring the sites, trying to reduce disruption and disturbances at the sites, especially when the females are there and reproductive, honestly, and raising pups. In the fall, there will probably also be some effort to see if they can lead us to any new hibernating sites that we could potentially protect and work with as well.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board?
No, I just want to say thanks. This is very exciting.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon, commissioners and everyone. So as Lisa mentioned, I'm Stefan Karkoff. I'm the avian recovery biologist with the Pennsylvania Game Commission. And today I'm going to be talking to you about our new initiative for recovering grassland birds in Pennsylvania. So there's 3 topics I'm going to cover in this talk. The first is the historical decline of grassland birds across North America and in Pennsylvania. Secondly, we're going to talk about the value of state game lands for grassland birds. And third, we'll get into future management that can be done on game lands for grassland bird conservation. Just so you know, I'm not going to focus on wetland birds in this talk, but we'll have a similar template that will be used as we begin efforts for wetland bird recovery in the future. So unfortunately, grassland birds have seen declines greatly across the country over the past 50 years or so. An article came out in the Journal of Science in 2019 that estimated 720 million grassland birds have been lost from the landscape since 1970. And that's about a 53% decline in populations of this group of birds. And some have fared worse than others. The eastern meadowlark, which is shown here and is a breeding bird in Pennsylvania, it's estimated that 3 in 4 of them have been lost from the landscape since 1970. And this isn't just happening on a nationwide scale, it's happening here in Pennsylvania. This shows 6 native grassland nesting birds in Pennsylvania, as well as in the bottom left-hand corner, you have a ringneck pheasant, which although is non-native, it is a staple to the hunting community here in Pennsylvania and is also highly reliant on grasslands for its success. But whatever way you slice it, you can see from the data which shows breeding bird survey counts of these individual species since 1965 through 2010, they're all in decline, some more steeply than others. So we've been losing our grassland birds for quite some time. So the question is why? Well, habitat loss is a major contributor to their decline. And the question then is, well, where's the habitat? Where has it all gone? And we do have a lot of open areas in Pennsylvania, which, as you might assume, is necessary for these grassland species. They like big open areas with few trees, low herbaceous cover with grassy fields for nesting on the ground. And in south central and southeastern part of the states, we have a lot of farmland that might seem hospitable, but is actually less so than you might assume. Row crops like corn, soybean fields don't have the ground cover for nesting, and hay fields, which do provide good nesting cover, are typically mowed multiple times during the bird nesting season, beginning in early to mid-May, and that makes it very difficult for pairs to fledge young. We also see a lot of urban and suburban development happening nowadays in Pennsylvania, as well as new technologies like solar panel fields, which are not great for ground nesting birds. So these technologies are growing, the urban development is growing, and it's happening especially on private land. And most of the open landscapes in Pennsylvania are privately owned with no guarantees of long-term protection. Fortunately, our state game lands offer a protected sanctuary for wildlife, particularly non-game species, where development or big ag pose little threat. Although most of our game lands are forested, there are dozens of larger grassland tracts, particularly in the western part of the state where old strip mines have been reclaimed to beautiful open grasslands, such as the one pictured here. This is an old reclaimed strip mine in Clearfield County that is now managed by Habitat Crews as open cover and supports a variety of grassland birds. With quality grassland habitat at a premium in Pennsylvania, there is good justification for protecting and managing these sites within the boundaries of state game lands. So our objectives for this initiative, first is to address data gaps at the state game land grasslands level. So what birds are there? What's using this habitat? Up until now, there's been limited observations of birds on some of our larger grassland complex within the state game lands. And more importantly, land managers and habitat crews may not be aware of the declining species that their current habitat work is supporting. And this dovetails nicely into the next objective, which is to build relationships with regional staff to prioritize grassland management where it's needed most. So we began addressing the first objective this summer with our first year of grassland bird surveys conducted on 20 state game lands with large grassland tracts using both PGC staff and volunteers. And our results show that the birds are here. They are using game land habitat. We've detected 9 of 12 grassland species with high conservation need in Pennsylvania. And some of these species, like the field sparrow on the far left bar of the graph, are more flexible in where they'll nest. So they'll nest in fields, but they'll also nest on edges. And we detected nearly 200 individuals across all 20 game lands for field sparrow. But then we have some species that are a little bit more specialized in their habitat requirements, like meadowlarks, grasshopper sparrows, henslow sparrows. You can see those kind of in the middle bars there. And we detected them less often and on fewer game lands. One of the specialist species in particular is the state-threatened northern harrier. And this is a bird of prey which we were only able to detect 5 times on our surveys this year. But the fact that harriers and other specialists were detected at all is a testament to the current management activities of local habitat crews, and their efforts are making a difference for these birds. It's evident from the results that we found. So we plan to continue these surveys annually to see how bird diversity changes with future management efforts. So using what we've learned from our bird surveys and combining that with the management objectives for individual game lands, our goal is to prioritize areas where grassland management will be most efficient and effective for increasing bird diversity. Of course, getting habitat in the right place doesn't happen without effective communication. And building relationships with individual game land staff is a high priority moving forward with this initiative. So far, reception for this initiative has been positive, with crews happy to learn what birds are benefiting from their ongoing work, and they're eager to learn which management activities are best for grassland birds. In talking with regional staff, it's obvious how much pride they have in the work they do on their local game lands, and many are already doing great work to promote grasslands. Our job is to help them understand why their work is so important for grassland birds and make recommendations on how they might improve the habitat even more. So over the next few years, my goal as the avian recovery biologist is to continue our grassland bird surveys on our highest value sites, work hand in hand with land managers and habitat crews to establish best management practices at our most valued grasslands and help incorporate these management activities into comprehensive management plans, which are used for long-term planning purposes on individual game lands. I look forward to building a strong relationship with local crews through field visits and regional grassland management workshops where crews from different game lands can meet and discuss their best management practices for grassland habitat. We hope that by improving habitat, we will see more grassland birds on state game lands and hopefully more public visitation to catch a glimpse of these wonderful grassland species. And so I'll leave you with a photo of a Henslow sparrow and a field on State Game Land 60 in Clearfield County, which had several singing males during our visits. And up until this visit, there had been no public prior record of this species, let alone any grassland species at this site. And so finding a site like this with a species that is somewhat reclusive and hard to find goes a long way when identifying the best areas for future management and helps us justify why this work is so important. So at this point, I will take any questions.
Questions from the board? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
So that concludes our meeting for this afternoon. We will pick this up tomorrow morning at 8:30, beginning with public comment. Thank you.